We are coming to the first session, and this is dedicated to build resilience before, during, and after disasters. And we're going to have a couple of presentations from the NDMA and the provincial disaster management authorities, back to back, very fast, and we know the time is too short. However, we try to keep on time. And then we're going to have a short panel discussion with 3 colleagues from different agencies on the themes of children, health and nutrition. And I'm going to ask them some difficult questions. And I think then we are already running out of time. If time permits, of course, I would like to hear some voices from the audience, but I think I can't promise. So this is ahead of us. However, as most sessions, we have a framing presentation. And setting the scene for us today for the first session is the Executive Director of the Sustainable Development Policy Institute, SDPI in short. He's, I think, virtually with us right now. And we are looking forward to welcome this morning Dr. Abid Suleri. Are you there? Yes.
Yes, I'm there. I'm audible.
Good morning. So can we give him a hand? Welcome, Dr. Abid. So the next 10 minutes are yours.
Thank you. Can I have my slides on slideshare mode, please?
Coming in a moment.
So thank you very much. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I think it's an honor to be able to join you virtually on this very important discussion around social protection, different forms of social protection, and how they relate to disaster and different phases of disaster. Now, what I'll be doing in next 10 minutes, trying to discuss our conventional social protection system vis-a-vis the adaptive social protection system across the disaster life cycle. Next, please. Next slide. This map, it is pretty recent from a journal in 2023. It shows the multi-hazards, nature of different hazards and how they affect different districts of Pakistan in different combinations. And one can see that with this multi-hazard, when they get aggravated with the CCC crisis that the world and Pakistan is facing today, climate change, conflict, and cost of living, they lead to some sort of systemic vulnerability. And these systemic vulnerabilities, they actually then require tackling them through a combination of techniques. And this combination of techniques is what we have been discussing here during the last 7 sessions, adaptive social protection. Next, please. Now, adaptive social protection, to make it in a simplistic way, it is dynamic versus it is dynamic, it's flexible, and it tries to address systemic vulnerabilities by bridging humanitarian aid with the long-term development. But I realized while making these slides last night that we have the ingredients for adaptive social protection. We have social safety nets, either based on many of the provincial social safety nets. We have climate adaptation institutions, NDRMF, PDMA, and DMA, and we have these disaster preparedness, and twisting and intertwining all 3 together, that actually provides us the foundation for adaptive social protection. Next. Looking at the building blocks, and again, we have the 4, literature tells us that there are 4 building blocks, data and information, different programs, institutional arrangement and partnership and finance. And as I said, that a cursory look and tells us that we have all the four ingredients. We have the rich repository of data, National Socioeconomic Registry and NADRA. We have different programs. We have institutional arrangements. We have development partners, and we do have finance. And in the next couple of minutes, I'll see that how they interact with different phases of disaster life cycle, preparation, response, recovery, so that we can break the cycle from crisis response recovery that leads to another crisis to preparation, response, and recovery. Next slide, please. As I said, that in case of data, we have risk-informed targeting. For example, one can argue that BISP and SCR can be used to predict the most vulnerable households for any disaster, whether it is since coastal community, flood-prone household, or it is the drought-affected prone districts or drought-prone households in southern Punjab. Similarly, if one looks at program and financing, NDRMF is already working on some preemptive projects, for example, flood barriers in Balochistan, or construction of houses with the raised plinths. UNDP's GLAV project, its early warning system and community training in Gilgit-Baltistan. And we know that different rural sport programs, they are trying to work in partnership with local communities, so that local communities, they are more prepared. And these are some of the ingredients of adaptive social protection for this particular phase of disaster preparedness. Next, please. Then is response, and in response, we are what we are talking about. It is about a dynamic response, which means whether either we can horizontally or vertically expand our responses. And this diagram that tells us that it works both ways, either expanding the population coverage or increasing the benefits that are provided. And again, in Pakistan, we have seen this both horizontal as well as vertical expansion. We saw during COVID and after floods 2022 that we were quickly increase our horizontal reach. And during or after floods, we could also see that the benefits, and both in terms of cash as well as in terms of in-kind benefits, those could be increased vertically. And there was this cross-sectoral coordination as well. What is not mentioned here, and I would like to give an emphasis that perhaps when we are talking of adaptive social protection program, in the benefits, we also need to take care of this psychosocial responses. I think that is one of the ingredient that I couldn't find it among our existing practices. We are providing cash, we are providing different non-monetary benefits, but we are not trying to take care of psychosocial behaviors and effects of survivors, something that while in this conference, perhaps you can discuss, or our colleagues from DMS, they can tell us. Next slide. Next slide, please. Yes. And this is the recovery. And in recovery, again, to break this vicious cycle of crisis preparedness and recovery, we are talking of livelihood restorations. Again, the example here is Cash for Work program, which were very successfully implemented in KP post-flood, where we have seen asset transfer. We also have seen this rebuilding of homes in Sindh, and there are always policy learning, which can again supplement and strengthen our ASP. Next, please. Finally, enablers of ASP in Pakistan, as I said, that we have data, we have technological outreach, both NADRA's digital ID as well as mobile banking. We have inclusion, element of inclusion. BISP is focusing on female-headed households, millions of them, and we have partnerships. But then there is a certain challenge. Next, please. And the major challenge that one can think of is finance. But again, looking at some of the best practices across the world, and I tried to tabulate them here. We have reserve funds. We know there are contingent credits, risk transfer or insurances, budget reallocation, donor financing, and humanitarian resources. So it's an a la carte menu. And one can see that different countries, they have tried using different modes of this bridge financing and supplement the financing for social protection. Of course, Pakistan can learn from some of these practices and some of these examples. Next, please. This is about challenge. The ingredients are there, but they are like dismantled pieces of jigsaw puzzles. We need to focus on data triangulation. We need to focus on funding gaps, how to manage it. We need to look at fragmented governance among institutions and program, and we need to avoid duplication and consolidate our resources by overlapping, removing overlaps in the programs. The last slide, please. So basically, we are talking of call to action where government needs to scale shock responsive social protection, improve fragmented governance, this financial risk layering, while partners and most of you sitting there, we need to collaborate with each other to learn from our programs to avoid duplication. And development partners, they need to align, especially the climate finance with this adaptive social protection. And I'll conclude with the very my favorite quote. I'm not sure who said it, but it is said that from Mohenjo-Daro's drainage system to today's WISP, Pakistan adopts. And we have been showing this region, the people, the communities, we have been showing our adaptation all along. Thank you very much for giving me time and letting me share my thoughts on this aspect with you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Abid Suleri, Executive Director of the Sustainable Development Policy Institute. Thank you for joining us online, and we wish you a good day. Greetings from Karachi. Thank you so much. So we heard about the importance of adaptive social protection across the disaster life cycle. Now we have 6 colleagues who will share their perspectives from a national perspective as well as from a provincial perspective. And we're going to start with the national perspective. So we have with us the Executive Director for Climate and Disaster Risk Financing from the NDMA. He has more than 25 years experience in many positions in the government. And I understand that he has been playing a crucial role recently as heading the Climate and Disaster Risk Financing Unit. So please give a warm welcome to Mr. Salim Shahzad Malik. So as yesterday, as we are a little bit on the clock, and I will use my gong after 5 minutes just to indicate where we are, very gentle. And then you have 1 or 2 minutes to come to a closing. So please go ahead, sir.
Thank you very much, Jost, for a very generous introduction. Good morning, everybody. So this is Salim Shahzad from National Disaster Management Authority. I feel privileged to be a speaker on this very august forum. During this presentation, we'll see as to how proactive disaster management as well as anticipatory action contribute towards the better social protection in Pakistan. So by reducing the vulnerabilities and enhancing resilience, we can do this. But before we do that, let's see how NDMA has transformed itself from a reactive disaster management body to a proactive disaster management body. So NDMA started its journey in 2007 when National Disaster Management Ordinance was promulgated and NDMA was established. Later on, this NDMO was converted into National Disaster Management Act 2010. But during its infancy stage, NDMA remained a reactive disaster management body by just focusing on rescue, relief, reconstruction activities. But the floods 2022 was a wake-up call for NDMA when it transformed itself from reactive to proactive disaster management by knowing early and detective early warning systems. Let's take a tour to the National Emergencies Operations Center. Video. This is National Emergency Operations Center, established in 2023. It was inaugurated by the Prime Minister, and this is the Prime Minister along with Bill Gates, who visited NEOC last year. NEOC, there are multiple flows of data from different sources to NEOC. We have a technical team here that collates that data into early warnings. Those data scientists and the modeling and the impact-based forecasting is done at NEOC and then issued to the communities. This is a virtual tour of NEOC. We have different layers of data from multiple sources, which I have already mentioned our tech team collates, and then we prepare reliable early warning. So this is the keyword here, reliable early warning system that will be used in anticipatory actions subsequently. So these are the capabilities and capacities of NDMA. Now NEOC, we can do all these things at our own, and now as a next step, we are now trying to incorporate artificial intelligence into these systems for early warnings. Our tech team is testing that, but not yet rolled out. This is the disaster management coordination mechanism for NEOC or NDMA. So we are relevant, we are concerned with all the relevant stakeholders. We have effective coordination mechanism at NDMA. Now let's talk about a little bit about the anticipatory actions. What anticipatory actions are actually? So these are the activities which are carried out between the early warning systems and the occurrence of a disaster. So we are now focusing on that. NDMA has conducted a national dialogue platform last year. That was first ever dialogue, and now we are going to conduct the second very soon. So under the anticipatory actions, there are pre-agreed plans and pre-arranged financing mechanism in place. So whenever there are triggers triggers point is reached, the early warning system is issued. Those already automatic mechanism that takes place without any further ado. Here we can see as to what is our saving by invoking these anticipatory actions. The red line is the traditional response line, where our needs are much more than if we adopt the anticipatory actions. This is just the journey of our dialogue platform on anticipatory actions. We have so far established the National Coordination Forum on AA, and we have issued the guidelines. We are made it a compulsory part of the simulation exercise that we carry out regular basis. Right now, one simulation exercise is being taken place at NDMA headquarters. So how to integrate and create a link between the anticipatory action and the social protection? Basically, anticipatory actions provide a shock response to the social protection system. It enhances the speed, quick access to the communities, disaster management to the vulnerable communities by enforcing those anticipatory actions. And we can enhance the scale of those anticipatory actions activities by using the social protection system. This is sustainable since it is built in our system now. And this is cost efficient as well. If we reach out to the vulnerable communities through other modes, instead of social protection, then we may have to incur extra expenses on that. These are the previous some interventions which were taken place, the cash disbursement programs in the past. And here I must tell you that in many countries across the globe, this anticipatory action is called the forecast-based financing also. And finally, we reach our challenges and way forward. So the climate change is basically the hard reality, and historical scenarios are less reliable. It means that we can't rely on the historical data for predicting in the future, because the monsoon patterns have changed, rainfall patterns have changed due to climate change. We can't predict on the basis of the previous data. We need to go ahead of that. Then extreme weather events increase in frequency and intensity has increased over a period of time. We had floods 2010. We had floods in 12. We flooded in 2011. We had a drought. Then we had forest fires and again floods 2022. Like I have mentioned that we are conducting now impact-based forecasting at NEOC, so we are moving beyond weather forecast now. However, I would like to highlight one big challenge in the anticipatory actions implementation is that the no-regret policy. It means that if an early warning has been issued to a specific vulnerable community, and the anticipatory actions took place after that early warning, but due to the fact that there is climate change and other variables as well, we could not we could not get to that disaster. The disaster did not occur. But the cash disbursement have already been made. So the finance managers need to focus on this no-regret policy. Rest I think I have already covered. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Salim Shahzad Malik, for sharing the impressive journey of NDMA. And I'm going straight into our first speaker from a provincial perspective. She is a developer, a GIS developer and a multi-hazard vulnerability and risk assessment specialist at the Provincial Disaster Management Authority of Sindh. I understand she has been instrumental in integrating GIS technology to streamline various disaster management processes. So give a warm welcome to Ms. Aisha Aziz.
Hello everyone, thank you for the introduction. I won't get into the much technical detail because since I am a developer and in which we are a thing, but I'll give another perspective which has already been mentioned by Madam Huma and Sir Abid also mentioned, Dr. Abid also mentioned that why coordination is important. So this is the topic, this is actually my topic, that why implementation of policies is important for the coordination as well and to structure things as well. Just to give a brief idea of what is actually disaster resilience. Disaster resilience is actually a community or a system. It's not about an institution or a different parties working for disaster management. It's about the whole community that is able to resist, absorb, accommodate, adapt, transform, and recover. It's a whole set of things that a community has to do for implementation of disaster resilience. Again, why policy is important? Policy is important to the fragmentation that exists in the system. Policy is something that can give it a proper structure, give it align things, align matters, and give them a picture of a provincial as well as better picture of a national statement as well. So let me give you an idea of what's the actually structure of disaster management in the country. There is NDMA as first year, then there are PDMAs and DDMAs. The role of PDMA is to the policies that have been issued by the NDMA. What PDMA does is align those policies as per the provincial statements or departments or their things, and create policies and structures and with collaboration with so many provincial as well as federal agencies, such as for the response we do need armed forces, support from the armed forces as well as telecommunication also, because PTA also helps us in disseminating our words to the community. So and now about the DDMAs, DDMAs do play a lot of role because they are the key implementators in this whole system. Now, it's not only about these three main agencies, it's also about what industry, what academia, what media, what other agencies can do for the disaster resilience and what can be done as a community as whole. So this is just an overview of how many stakeholders there can be for disaster management and disaster resilience in a country or a society or a system. So this is an overview of the role of PDMA at different stages of disaster management cycle. At the first stage, Provincial Disaster Management Authority has to implement DRR policies as per the national DRR policies that have been issued by the NDMA and all, adapt them to the provincial level, social, and local level. Then there comes like work with other departments, make them more sensitize them actually for disaster resilience, to incorporate disaster resilience in their implementation as well. What is one of the challenges that I'll mention later is like all the departments even are now getting sensitized to it, but like to make them understand and make them do actions for it, for disaster management, and incorporating them into their activities is one of the key factors that will not for that PDMA won't have to intervene in their like domain or things, just if they could do it by themselves. Similarly, for the disaster preparedness phase, develop plans, give proper actions to who should do what NGOs should do, what the local community, the local people who can who work as volunteers or other humanitarian agents should do. This should be like in the structure of a proper plans. We do have a few plans created which are available on our website. You can go to our PDMA's website and they'll be available. We have created one for tsunami just recently, so please do go through it and do share your comments, because they are also important to to improve those plans as well. So this is just like, again, this is a community-based thing. It's not something one institution can do it on its own. Similarly, collaborate with NDMA, do stockpiling. That is another like complementing job. Then response again comes with the coordination. PDMA has one of the key roles in giving DDMAs and between the, you can say between the implementing bodies at DDMA and downwards level and agencies as well, because it works as a bridge. It works as a communication that what are the needs and how can we adapt things to make them better. Similarly, for the recovery and learn from your past, improve your plans, do better things. Yeah, the key challenges. Dr. Abid also mentioned the same, fragmentation of resources. We need a centralized data system, which everybody can use and refer to in case of emergency. Not only emergency, but like to get an idea of what's happening in the surroundings and why should we do what we want, what should be done and why should be done. So these are the things. Again, overlapping, resource constraints, these fragmentations, all these things can be addressed more better if we do the centralized data. We do have the information available to all so that everybody can make better decisions as well. Biperjoy and Heatwave 2024, they were the lessons, they were the results of the lessons that were learned in 2022. Why were they more managed? And in case of Biperjoy, the anticipatory actions actually worked when PDMSN collaborated with NDMA and armed forces as well to evacuate people. 84,000 people were evacuated, and like there was very, very minimal damage. So this is one of the good examples. Again, Heatwave 2024, one of the like most highest temperatures were reached in that period. But 2024 Heatwave, the NGOs played a key role in awareing the community and making them more resilient in terms of. So like these are the few things that we worked on. This is the Heatwave situation report. They are available on our website, so I won't go into much detail. And this is the key takeaways that I have already mentioned in the challenges, that like address things at institutions, at every forum, so that everybody can incorporate disaster management into their cycle, making institution more resilient as well, and the whole community ultimately. Invest in the early warning system, work on the proactive approach, and create a common platform for everybody to get an idea of things, what's happening. This is from our side. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Aisha. Speaking on behalf of PDMAs, and I think my battery is maybe not so good anymore. but highlighting the importance of interdepartmental coordination in disaster preparedness. And we are going now to an example from Punjab. We have with us a senior government officer with more than 15 years of experience. He is a director of operations at PDMA Punjab, and I understand he oversees the risk assessment, preparedness and emergency response at the PDMA. So please welcome Mr. Nisar Ahmed Sani. Where are you? Is he here? Okay, so then we move maybe on and come back to him. And I think next in our line of speakers is our colleague, project director, PDMA of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, also a person with more than 15 years working experience with the government of Pakistan, but also with UN agencies, national, international NGOs. So I hand over the word to Mr. Syed Musafer Shah Gilani. Please come on, welcome.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Well, that was quite expected from Johns, that how he will pronounce my name. So I will again introduce myself. My name is Syed Musafer Shah Gilani, and I am from I'm project director at the PDMA Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. Very happy to attend this very informative event and talk to the intellectuals in front of me. It's quite an honor, and I'm very much thankful to the GIZ for providing this very good opportunity. So we are going to discuss and share the case study. Actually, with the support of the GIZ, the PDMA Khyber Pakhtunkhwa has formulated the social protection policy back in 2022. So it is an intention and commitment that the policies developed should not be kept in the ranks. It should be implemented. Like the country director said in her opening speech on the first day, that it's not about the knowledge, it's about the actions. So we are going to, we are committed to that actions, and we are going to formulate the first ever subnational DRR policy of the country. So this is the case study for institutionalizing the adaptive social protection in the DRM spectrum. First of all, we are going to present the need. Like if we say and if we consider, the managing of the disaster is quite difficult for all of us, either that is the government, the social society, the community, for everyone. Response is very difficult. Proactive approach will make us very much in a position where we can save life, where we can save the infrastructure, and where we can save the very much vital resources of the country. So everybody knows, I think, that after the formulation, after the approval from the National Cabinet, the NDMA Act, which in para 14 2B states that every province should have a dedicated DRR policy. This act was owned by the PDMA Khyber Pakhtunkhwa in 2012, and with the commitment to formulate the DRR policy of their own, they approached the GIZ. We are very much thankful to the German government, the GIZ, especially to Johanna and their team, who were approached, and they generously supported us and with the commitment to formulate this very vital policy. So this was an obligatory approach, an obligation for the provincial disaster management authorities, and which is very much taken by the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa government. Then if it comes to the powers and functions, as I told that this act was then approved by the provincial cabinet in 2012. So the powers and functions of the PDMA clearly states that to formulate the provincial disaster management policy, and then to coordinate and monitor the implementation of the national policy, which was developed back in 2013 by the NDMA, and lay down guidelines to be followed for preparation of disaster management plans, by the provincial departments and the district authorities. So We have the DDMUs, like there is a slight change in the Provincial Act. The PDMS senior management considers that it should not be the DDMS, it should be DDMUs. Like one authority cannot work under the other authority. So we call it the DDMUs, the District Disaster Management Units at the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. There is dedicated staff for that by the name of Additional Deputy Commissioner Relief and Humanitarians, and they are posted in the 26 districts of the 36 districts. Then we have the global and national commitments. I'm sorry. The Sendai framework, as we all know, started the fourth pillar of the Sendai framework, to leave no one behind. So everybody is vulnerable in the disaster, and especially the person with disabilities, the transgender, the older people, they are more vulnerable. So these things are taken in the consideration while we are formulating this very vital policy. Then we have the SDGs Goal 5, which is the national commitment, and the PDMAs are contributing towards this as well. The PDMA developed a roadmap back in the 2012 to 2019, which is now outdated. But after this policy, we have already started the work on the developing the 5 years plans, which will be an actionable plans with the contributions and with the coordination of all the stakeholders, the provincial level, the humanitarian partners, and in the other partners present at the province. These are the specific objectives which we are taking into consideration to reduce or avoid potential losses from the hazards, all sorts of hazards, including the man-made, like the quorum response is going on currently in the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. So we have considered this as well, and we have a complex emergency wing at PDMA, and we have formulated and notified a technical working group for such like considerations as well, to capture the changing climate and its adverse effect known by all of the colleagues, to advise better strategies for prevention, mitigation, preparedness. It is very much vital to be very well prepared than to give response at the end when the disaster strikes. And then to build the resilience of poor and vulnerable households by investing in their capacities to prepare for cope with and adopt shocks. Like this is the standard definition of the adaptive social protection. We all know this. So with the combination of the grant release from the GIZ under the adaptive social protection, we are formulating this very much vital policy which is called the provincial subnational DRR policy. Then we have another indicator of the MHVRA. We are conducting 2 MHVRAs in 2 of the districts, and then we are going for the community-based disaster risk management approach, which is the 3rd indicator of this grant. Now I will request my colleague Mustafa Khan to go through for the remaining presentation, the policy pillars and the social protection. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Musawir, for giving this very detailed overview. So I'll very quickly, I just have 2 minutes, so very quickly walk you through the various, the process of policy development. As you can see, as Mr. Musawir also said, that we had 8 policy pillars for our disaster risk reduction policy. The ones highlighted in red are basically linked to adaptive social protection. So synchronization of policies, legislations, and institutional mandate for disaster risk management, not within the DRM sector, but also beyond DRM and with the social protection and climate change adaptation. Multi-hazard vulnerability and risk assessment of KP, again, this is related to adaptive social protection because it gives you the forecasting capability and the capability to predict disasters and take early action. Establishment of multi-hazard and integrated early warning system, especially when linked with social protection. Community-based participation, taking disaster risk management as close to the communities as possible. The methodology, we basically constituted 7 technical working groups on key thematic areas. We also had adaptive social protection as one of the technical working groups. This is, on the next slide, you can see the composition of the various 18 departments. This is the first time on the provincial level, actors in the climate change, adaptation sector, social protection sector, and DRM sector have come on one platform to discuss and do policy deliberations and consultations. So the findings of these and the recommendations, policy recommendations coming out from this technical working group are going to be part of the DRR policy. The methodology, we conducted a series of focus group discussions, key informant interviews, field visits, 3 policy dialogues were conducted with public universities, and the way forward, the working draft is still under preparation. After this, there's going to be a series of internal and external review meetings and a validation workshop and dissemination workshop. I just want to very quickly bring you to this slide, which is basically sort of the crux of the whole discussion, that how do we build community resilience through leveraging adaptive social protection. So as you can see, we have a whole toolbox of interventions within the social protection sector that can be used and leveraged to prepare for, cope with, and adapt to the communities to COVID shocks. And we all are aware, we have, witnessed some excellent presentations yesterday and the day before, that having strong and effective social protection system that can provide comprehensive and adequate coverage, effective coverage to the communities, provides the basis for building resilience. And building resilience of poor and vulnerable households against COVID shocks lies at the heart of adaptive social protection. So basically, this is one of the key recommendations, to have a toolbox of social protection programs that is contextualized, that is, designed and executed according to the socioeconomic and climate-related, conditions of the communities. We have access to, promoting in the pre-stage, linking early warning information to social protection, providing financial inclusion. And I just want to, say a few words on the how to build adaptive communities. Productive inclusion programs that complement cash transfers with vocational trainings, with interest-free microfinance, and various human capital development initiatives that basically builds resilience over the long term. I think this is the key area to go. Some of the key policy recommendations coming out of our literature review and discussions on various forums and out of the technical working group, it basically tells us that we need to establish formal coordination structures across DRM and social protection. Not only establish these structures, but also translate them into at the delivery level and at the procedural level, at the SOPs, in the form of SOPs. There's also a very strong emphasis on decentralizing shock responses, taking it as close to the communities as possible. The earlier point is also linked to having, scalability protocols and contingency plans for social assistance. And naturally, in the area of financing, there's developing crisis and disaster risk financing strategies, and strengthening the national payment systems. So I won't go into the detail in the interest of the time, but these are some of the few, key recommendations that we are going to be incorporating, and we are going to be elaborating on them also. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So this was the approach of Raiba Patunkwa. We still have 2 more, so we're a little bit schedules, bear with me. And we're going straight to our colleagues from Balochistan. We have with us the Deputy Director of the Provincial Disaster Management Authority, focusing on rescue and monitoring and evaluation in his work. Please welcome Mr. Asghar Ali Jamali.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you very much for brief introductions and the opportunity. So the Balochistan is the largest province of the Pakistan, covering 45% 47% of the total land of the Pakistan, and covered with the 90% mountainous ranges and the only 10% that is the plain area of the Balochistan. And some of the disasters or the hazards likely mentioned are here, which make more vulnerable to the Balochistan, especially in terms of earthquake, because some of the fault lines are crossing to the Balochistan, especially in the central part or the capital of the Quetta. There are the two fault lines, Ghazaband and the Chaman to Noshki fault lines, which create the more vulnerable to the Quetta city. And then everybody knows that the mega earthquake occurred in 1935, which created the damages more than the 70% and the loss of the life, as well as 2008 earthquake of the Ziyarat and 2013 in the Mashkel, and as well as 2021 Harnai earthquake, which create a massive damage in the Balochistan. In the same manner that the Rakshan and the Makran region of the province, that is most vulnerable for the drought, because that is the arid and it's receive very less precipitations. In the same manner that the eastern belt of the Balochistan, especially the Nasirabad zone, that is very prone for the flooding, and then the mountainous regions of the Suleiman ranges, the nearby districts like the Sherani, Job, are the vulnerable for the flash floodings. As well as we have the 100 kilometers, the coastlines, huge coastlines, where we have the coastal hazard in terms of the cyclones and the typhoons, as well as the tsunami or the earthquake. And in 1945, before creation of the Pakistan, there was the mega tsunami in Gawadar coastal range areas, and then at that time the 4,000 casualties was reported. Coming towards the Sibi division and the Makran range areas, the Turbat, that are the very vulnerable for the heat waves, which create the more problem in order to make the effective or the social protection in Balochistan. The social and the economic factors are that are the lack of the budgeting and the awareness in the communities. We are focusing now to launch the CBDRM program throughout the Balochistan in order to aware our community to be very prepared or the better prepared to respond to the disasters. In the same manner, the environmental degradations, it also make the most vulnerable to the Balochistan, like the deforestation and the populations factors. Now the linkage between the social protection and the disaster management, that is the very important, and it has the very close linkage. And the social sector's protections plays a crucial roles in the disaster management by building resilience before and after the disasters, and also in the recovery and the support. In disaster preparedness, the PDM Balochistan, working with the humanitarian sector and the line department organizations on the social protections that providing the psychosocial support in order to promote the social safety of the communities in the areas, as well as after the disasters, when disaster hits, in the aftermath of the disaster, that the PDMA provide the social protection services, which can be rapidly scaled up, the emergency assistance such as the cash transfer or the food distribution to the affected populations in Balochistan. In long-term recovery, the rehabilitations of the vulnerable population by approaching the social protections framework to benefit the population affected by the disasters. Currently, the housing reconstruction unit has been established, which is going to build the 0.2 million the permanent shelter for the flood affectees of the 2022 floods. In the same manner that we have also established the gender inclusive cell recently in order to provide the safety to the general populations during the disaster situations. As well as in 14 districts, the PDMA Balochistan has conducted the MHVRA assessment studies that is present on our websites. Then the strategies for the disaster resilience in the Balochistan. What can be the strategies? That can be the community engagement and the empowerment through the capacity buildings of the community in the DRR approach, we can make them the empowered to respond betterly in time of the disasters. In the same manner, the education and the awareness programs, PDMA is committed to celebrate the national and the international disaster reduction days and the tsunami awareness days. Recently, we celebrate the DRR Day and the Tsunami Awareness Day for the first time in the history of the PDMA in Balochistan. As well as access to the early warning system, PDMA is closely coordinating with the Pakistan Met Department for timely dissemination of the alerts and the advisory for the general public. In the same manner, the social protection and the insurance, we are also engaging with the livestock and the agriculture department to bridge to the gap of the financing and the insurance of these sectors, because the Balochistan's economy mostly rely on the agriculture and the livestock sectors. In the same manner, we are also coordinating with the NGOs and the international organization for sustainable approaches to engage humanitarian sector for the development of vulnerable communities. The key challenges in order to protect the general public and provide the social safety is very important, and it also plays the very important role in the impact of the disasters and the make the vulnerable populations. That the lack of the preparedness and the coordinations, this is the key challenge in Balochistan, that the lack of the capacity building to the public sectors and the lack of coordinations is a critical point in Balochistan. The second, that is the insufficient funding and the resources, that the human and the financial lack of the resources in the preparedness and the mitigations. And next, the weak infrastructure and the data system. In time of the disaster, founding the real-time data system is very crucial. And then the climate change and the increasing disaster frequency, that due to the climate change, that before we were having in Pakistan that the 4 season, now abruptly the season are going to be changed, that only we have got the winter and the summer season. Due to this, that the frequency of the disasters has also been increased. And thank you.
Thank you so much for our colleague from Balochistan. And now we still have the presentation from Punjab. I would like to call on the Deputy Director Operations of PDMA Punjab, Mr. Nisa Ahmed Sani. Welcome. Please give him a hand.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, and good morning. And thank you very much as well to GSD for organizing this beautiful event. I can cover the few slides within the allocated time, and I will talk about how the MHVRA basically is important. Risk assessment is important while we are basically collecting the data and all that. MHVRA, while the time the presentation is being played, I can just explain the background. The MHVRA study was undertaken by the PDMA Punjab in 2016, and it took us 2 years to conduct a very detailed study. So we have a risk assessment of the 20 vulnerable districts of the Punjab, and we are also now in a phase to basically cover the rest of the districts of the Punjab, as well as we will also cover the nalas and the hill torrents in the Punjab. So why integration of the social protection data is important? It basically enhances the targeted response and the preparedness, identifies vulnerable population for the efficient resource allocation, strengthen evidence, decision making is very important, and MHVRA enable us to basically make informed decision making, support resilient community through the proactive risk reduction. PDMA's key responsibility, as we basically working from last couple of years, coordination horizontal and vertical with the stakeholders, government stakeholders, as well as the non-government stakeholders, development partners in EMA and the federal ministries as well. Early warning and evacuation planning, risk assessment, relief assistance, and the social protection integration. This is very important. And the last one is also very important, disaster risk reduction and the climate adaptation. How PDMA integrates the social protection data. Mapping of the vulnerable communities using social protection databases, determines affected population for relief and rehabilitation, design targeted financial livelihood support. This is very important that we are focusing on the shock responsive basically assistance. uses real-time data for proactive response planning, as we basically on the need basis we conducting the survey and updating our databases. Okay. Integration of the social protection data into MHVRA is basically enable us for an informed decision making, effective early warning and evidence-based evacuation plans, designing of the target assistance, pre-positioning of the relief items. This is very important for us, that basically enable us. Validation of the damaged infrastructure. I can also show a simulation in next slide as well regarding this. Identification of vulnerable points in the protection measures. And the last one is very important, like 30% response time we have reduced by using this MHVRA. This is how we are basically, this is important. Next please. Okay. So MHVRA Unfold, we basically conducted MHVRA and collected the data on 292 parameters. Before conducting this MHVRA, we conducted a number of workshops, a number of consultation sessions with all stakeholders, including PSPA. Door-to-door GIS-based survey was conducted, Android application developed, 400 surveys were deployed. 9 sectoral experts reviewed these plans and the reports of the MHVRA that are available with us. So I can just show the 1.5 minute simulation regarding how we are basically using this these databases. Can I have the pointer, laser pointer in this? Doesn't have a laser. Okay. Okay, if you can see, we can simulate any scenario in this during this by using this database. Like we have selected over here a river, and we selected the 8 lakh cubic water will basically, as per the Met Department, will basically come, and these are the settlement basically would be affected if the 8 lakh cubic water will hit, and these are the houses. Those will be affected within that water line, and this is the data like the household data. We have the CNC of the household. We have the mobile number. This is very important that we are sending them the SMS, robocalls, and they can also interact with us through our toll-free number, that is 1129. And we also have the picture of that house as well. Like if he can claim the false compensation, for example, so we can rectify from this data. I can show you in this picture, you can see the house, that's the construction of house, and this is also the question on us as well. If this house is unable, for example, for any compensation, we can like just say that the lavish house basically built on this area within the river line, and the person like the financial support, how he or she can basically eligible for this. So this is like we also have the infrastructure data, like this is the road that basically going to this particular village, and we also have the infrastructure data as well. Like we have, if you can see the legend over there, we have the data of the like the boundaries, village boundaries, like the graveyards, parks, public buildings, and all that. So 292 parameters. On top of this, we can see this under this indent of water, 3 districts would be affected, 182 villages would be submerged, and affected population estimated, and affected infrastructure, and affected crop area as well, and the disabled person in this data as well. We also basically incorporated the gender data as well in this, male, female, and also the major diseases as well in that area, availability of the water, availability of the health facilities, education facilities, and this data is also being used by the Planning and Development Punjab while using, they are basically constructing new projects in these areas. So next step, this is very important, strengthening data-driven decision making, integrated social protection data with climate risk mapping to ensure targeted relief assistance, anticipatory action. This is like very important as well because we are working on this, and effective safety nets for the vulnerable communities. In socialized social protection in DRR policies, this is very important. We should basically plan, in the planning phase, we should basically rectify these things because we have experienced many examples like the big mega projects also basically not catering for DRR. For example, if we can construct a bridge on a river and bridge length only 1 kilometer, and but the river bed is like 10 kilometer, and we are squeezing the river, and that basically impact the upstream population as well. So strengthening multi-stakeholder partnerships, smooth data exchange, and this workshop is like covering my last point, because partnership is very important, because we basically conducted this MHVR exercise with the generous support of the Asian Development Bank back in like 2016, and we urge that the donors, the other development partners can collaborate with all PDMs. Like we basically, ecology of the disaster management is evolved enough, and we are basically day by day basically strengthening our capacity, and we also basically strengthening the capacity of the districts. And PDMA Punjab has also introduced the local level disaster management system at the Tehsil level as well, and the Union Council level. So this is my last slide. Building resilience together community, this is a message like integrating social protection data is not just about the preparedness. It's like the long-term inclusion, anticipatory action, and the resilience for the community. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sani, for this impressive example from Punjab. So this was our little tour through the different provinces, learning from their work, their approaches, their experiences, their plans. We still not yet through that session, and looking at the time, you might have noticed that we're a little bit behind schedule, so no worries. We're gonna start the coffee a little bit later. We still have a full coffee break. We're gonna eat a little bit later lunch. I'm sure you had a good dinner last night, and then we're gonna catch up in the afternoon, so no worries. I think we are still more or less in control of time. However, I wanted to have a conversation with 3 colleagues on building resilience through anticipatory action with a thematic focus on education, health, and nutrition. Our assigned moderator could not join this morning, so they found a replacement, myself. So I'm going to have the pleasure to call upon 3 colleagues from 3 different organizations to join me on stage here, and I will introduce them while we are sitting on stage. But they are representing the World Food Program, UNDP, and I think, let me see, and the Asian Development Bank. So may I request my 3 panelists to join me on stage, and while you relax for 1 minute, everybody. So, thank you for this little talk show style or World Economic Forum style session. We want to talk a little bit about how disasters disproportionately affect vulnerable populations, particularly children, and the need, or the critical need, for preemptive strategies to mitigate these impacts. And we know there are 3 stages. We saw that also in the presentations: before disaster, during disaster, and then after disaster, on learning and integrating the learnings into new policies, strengthen the resilience. So I have with me 3 experts, and they will probably look at this from their respective angles they're representing. So to my near left is the principal social sector specialist from the Asian Development Bank. She's actually covering especially East, Central, and West Asia region right now. She brings a lot of expertise in economic analysis and sustainable development. So please welcome from the Asian Development Bank, Ms. Sin Long. And then in the middle of my panel, you see again the Deputy Country Director of the World Food Program here in Pakistan. I had the pleasure to introduce her yesterday for one session to set the scene. She worked all over the globe, not only in Washington and Rome, but also in crisis areas such as East Timor, Rwanda, and Sudan. Please welcome again Ms. Rati Balakrishnan. And my fault, actually, I gave her the wrong UN agencies. There are so many, right? But she used to work for UNDP at least, right? So it's not that wrong. So maybe it wasn't just updated. So our final panelist, she's a senior program officer at the International Labour Organization, and she used to work for UNDP, British Council, and GIZ before. and she's in the moment working at the country office in Islamabad. And her areas of specialization include employment and industrial relations, but very much also social protection. Please welcome Ms. Rabia Razak. Okay, so you see I'm sitting here with experts, so I don't have to be smart myself. I just have to ask smart questions. And now I'm going to ask you, the three of you, each of you one question, and then we do a second round, and then we see where we are, okay? So maybe I start with Xin Long. So I would like to know from you, what role does ADB envision for anticipatory action in ensuring access to social protection, education, and healthcare services during disasters, especially in the vulnerable regions of Pakistan? Can you share some thoughts?
Thank you. I would like to say that ADB has been, supporting Pakistan and other developing member countries, for, the adaptive social protection for access to education, for access to basic social services like education, health, nutrition, and others, in a way that helps systematically address, the constraints and gap. We would not claim that we are only doing at this during disaster stage, things. We see more important, like before disaster, what shall be done. For example, in Pakistan, as yesterday my colleagues also presented, we have, the policy-based, lending, in order to address, the constraints in the strategies and policies in, firstly, to make sure this institutional readiness of measuring and mapping climate change disaster risks and the way of budget, planning for contingency and, a risk layout approach. So this is one thing, from this overall, let's say, macro institutional framework thing. And then we also see, since we are talking about how to assure the social services, through the social protection assistance, we see the supply side players equally important, that we aim to encourage their participation and their contribution consistently from the demand side incentives provided to them. One example we would like to share is that we see the potential of, for example, for the Nazik Income Support Program, who has been providing the education conditional cash transfer. And we deem there is a potential of encouraging this non-formal education and accelerated learning programs for out-of-school children coming back to schools. Why we say this is still a potential? Because the supply side has not yet been widely, the capacity has not been widely established from development partners like JICA and others, like the support at the supply side needs to be unfolded, that from demand side incentives on conditional cash transfer would bring more children to their care, and then this scaling up of supply side would also take off. So we see this collaboration between demand side, that is who we are mainly here, and the supply side, who we might be able to invite them in next National Social Protection Conference, from education department, from non-formal education department, and the others. So this is a second. We try to really encourage is the linkage between demand side and supply side, and especially when we take into account of the disaster resilience and adaptation. Let's give a scenario that once disasters happen, and children might pause, their access to school. For some aged children, they might really, get, for example, if it really lasts long, it might get older than the proper schooling age, and then by the, and it might even refrain his or her further, intention to go back to school. So, like how to make sure that this bridging up services could there be ready from social protection aspect would be very important. Yeah, I would like to, give the floor to also other colleagues. Yeah, thank you.
I will come back to you, Sin Long, and thank you for highlighting the importance between the supply side and the demand side. And I think a very good suggestion for the third National Social Protection Conference. So, Rati, let me come to you. I mean, we all know that the World Food Programme's mandate is very much about securing nutrition, also for vulnerable groups. So, in your anticipatory action strategy, how do you prioritize nutrition for children and pregnant women before and after a disaster strikes?
Thank you. Before I answer that question, I just wanted to say a little bit about the coping mechanisms both the women and their families go through here in Pakistan. So every day, all around in Pakistan, there's segments of the population that have to make very difficult choices. So it's between skipping a meal, not sending their children to school, going into debt, giving up your daughter to an early marriage despite not wanting to, pooling resources to send your child off on a boat, so migration, or selling one or all of your sons to an insurgent group. These are very stark realities of what faces the most vulnerable people in Pakistan. And I've talked to many of the mothers and fathers about this in my last 3 years here. For WFP, in the end, what we look at when we look at anticipatory action is a lot of what you've heard this morning. And it's really about the early warning systems that we need to put in place, using data and forecasting tools. And we've done that many times in Pakistan, including in Nowshera, Chasada, along the Kabul River in KP. I think someone referred to no regrets, and it's true, like in the end we had those triggers, we crossed those triggers, we released the cash, and in fact the damage wasn't as bad as we thought it would be. But it does allow for early interventions in a very targeted manner, which is really important as part of anticipatory action. In terms of nutrition, we do pre-position a lot of food assistance, including our specialized nutritious food. But more and more for WFP globally, what we want to do is give families the choice. What's important is to maintain the dignity. So in fact, a lot of times we're switching to cash. So where markets are functioning, there's no real need to provide in-kind food assistance. So we provide cash instead so mothers and fathers can make their own choices. Now, in order to do that from an anticipatory action point of view, we've got to get our financial service providers up and ready. And so we've got standby arrangements with a lot of the banks in this country. And we also do a lot of pre-registration of the most affected households. As you heard this morning, we've got loads of data. Maybe they're not so integrated as we'd like them to be. But we have a lot of data in this country, so it's a question of how do we pull that data together and use it in the best way so we do have those triggers in place. And finally, I'd like to say, the WFP of the past loved to do the things solo as a fire truck cowboy. And what we've learned, and we saw that a lot, I think, in the 2010 floods, the WFP of today knows that we can't do things in isolation and we really need to work together. So it's not just working with the PDMAs, but as the floods of 2022 showed us, we really have to go all the way down to the DDMAs as well. And of course with the NDMA as the overall umbrella coordination branch. And of course with working through all the issues with the NDMA and PDMA and DDMAs. I often wonder, BISP gave a big one-time cash, 25,000 rupees, to all the flood-affected BISP beneficiaries. And I wonder if we had another flood, what would that look like in the context of ASP, in the context of AA? What should it look like? And I hope that before the next flood, whenever it comes, we are ready. Yeah? Thank you.
Thank you, Rati. And I think I have to come back to you with my second question soon. But let me go to Rabia. I mean, you work for the ILO. We all know one major focus or major mandate of the ILO is focus on labor standards. So what are some examples of how anticipatory action has supported child labor prevention during disasters?
Thank you, Jost. I think I would thank you for asking me that question first, because not a lot of people know that ILO is a normative agency, and by that I mean that we really draw up standards, global standards on labor that govern the world of work, but there are a handful of these 400 so standards that are actually around social security. And they don't only provide guidance to the development and design of social security programs, but also give you strategic principles in terms of what these programs should look at. So inclusivity, adaptability, accessibility, coherence in terms of harmonization, but also in terms of adequacy, and a number of other guiding principles. But more, to sort of come back to your question, there is a recommendation of the ILO, which is employment and decent work for peace and resilience. And I don't think a lot of people know about this, but 187 member states have adopted this recommendation, because it provides those very elements that you have, talked about in terms of what are the anticipatory actions or measures you need to put in place. How do you identify risks? Where are these risks in the world of work? Who will tend to these risks? What are the preparatory measures? What is the readiness? And how do you sort of respond to or adapt to disasters when the situation arises? So what we did post-2022 was that the federal government requested ILO support in developing a world of work crisis response strategy. And as part of that strategy, and we have a number of those strategies, right? So as part of the strategy, what we really wanted to do was take small steps in terms of identifying what can we really do to help employers sort of mitigate where employment losses will occur. Who will bear these losses? Who are the vulnerable groups? Are these contractual workers? Are they in the informal economy? And we know most of the, these are answers that we know about. But again, this mapping and diagnostics is so important, and very often employers do not know this, which is why they do face a lot of loss in terms of supply chain actors, but also in terms of the dependency they have on contractual workers. And these are the contractual workers who are not, we saw it in COVID, who are not covered by social protection. So you see, this information is important for employers to be able to train their workforce to fill in that gap, should it occur, but also for them to formalize a supply chain that will be available should a disaster occur, and they don't get to face loss of production or business orders being cancelled, or their workforce, trained workforce, going home. And this is information that's also important for the government, because then the government needs to put in place national policies and legislative frameworks that are now aligned with not just what the conventions and recommendations are telling you, but also put in place like unemployment guarantees or schemes that will then protect contractual workers who are laid off, who are unemployed after a disaster or in the wake of a disaster. So that's one. The other thing that is also an anticipatory element in the strategy is for the government to boost its enforcement machinery. So now we know, and I think it was NDMA Balochistan who talked about gender units. There are child labor and bonded labor units. Again, not a lot of people know about it. And I actually have a problem with the framing presentation that Dr. Saleri talked about. He said there are many, many social safety net programs. There are many, many social insurance programs also. We don't see a single stakeholder, I'm sorry, I haven't come across a stakeholder here in this gathering who is representing that lot of, the institutions of work, employee social security institution, EOBI, old age pension. These are institutions of work that are actually covering the formal sector workers and are providing social insurance by through a mix of contributory and non-contributory. So I think we need to, because we're talking about fiscal space, we're talking about private sector contributions, we're talking about a culture of social safety, it's very important to include these stakeholders, and then sort of, have a conversation that's that is relatable for all. So I'm just going to stop at the last element, which was the enforcement machinery. And there we helped, for example, the government to look at these hotspots where we know child labor or children are susceptible to labor or exploitative labor conditions, and where families are vulnerable. So we help them with livelihoods interventions, with access to microfinance. And this is something that now, unfortunately late, but still opportunity in terms of preparing for the next floods, as Rati said, that we are helping them access to microfinance, access to capacity building, access to productivity, access to production, inputs to production. So this is an ecosystem that you help these own account workers and micro enterprises to actually be more sustainable and resilient in preparing for a disaster. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabia. I wanted to have a follow-up question right away. We talked a little bit more about workers, so let's focus a little bit more on children and family livelihoods. So how can, in your opinion, what's your recommendation, how can social protection systems be designed to ensure that children's education and family livelihoods are preserved in disaster-prone areas?
So you asked, why do children work? Why do they have to work? They have to work when there's an elderly or a family earner who either who becomes disabled or is unemployed, or a mother who doesn't get maternity benefits and has to work while the child has to look after younger siblings and therefore leave school. Children also work because of general poverty and vulnerability, or out of individual and collective shocks, and there are many vulnerabilities or risks associated. And these are the same contingencies that the Convention of the ILO on Minimum Social Security Standards, Convention 102, talks about categorically, laying out a very robust sort of architectural framework of how life cycle approaches should look at. And in the case of a disaster where children can be susceptible or are forced to work in either place of their parents or to help their parents with family incomes that are affected. So the ILO is focusing on, like I said, access to livelihoods, alternative livelihoods. If, for example, we saw in floods where agricultural lands were inundated and there was no activity to be done, there the whole idea was to also help put in place earlier lifelong learning and skills development plans. Now this is important because we generally resort to skills when they, parents give up on children, and skills is like the last sort of option to send them to. So really building in, and this is what we did with UNICEF as well, to build in with non-formal education centers in the villages and connecting them with skills so that they do not have to leave schools, but also sort of transit to work in a way at an age that is admissible, but at an age where they can also sort of enter light work. So that's one. The other thing that is important is to look at, for example, social protection floors. The recommendation 202 of the ILO, which is on social protection floors, also says there should be 4 income securities or guarantees that the state must provide. And one of them is a universal child benefit, or a children income security, which basically is to help children with nutritional needs, with health needs, with education, and not just in the wake of disaster. It's a universal benefit. Should you need it, you should be able to access it. So this is the kind of sort of platform that we provide in terms of what the norms or standards are saying, but also what the role the institutions of work can play if you want sustainable, inclusive development which centers around people and around children. But also specifically, and I'll just take last minute here, that I wanted to actually, there's a ILO UNICEF study done in 2022 on how social protection impacts or does not impact child labor. And I was actually preparing for this when I came across this study, and this is a study that basically reviews 62 reports covering 47 social protection programs starting 2010 to date. And we generally say, oh, let's, do cash transfers and child labor will go. So, this actually report gives you very interesting findings in terms of, no, you would think it would go, but many a times cash transfer do not have that effect if they do not necessarily focus on children. So I'll just give you one example from there. School feeding programs and in-kind food subsidies for families with children. And here the outcome was, while school feeding had correlationship with better education enrollment or lowering the participation in economic activities, in-kind transfers were less effective or had no sort of consequence in terms of child labor, effect on child labor. So you see, we also have to sort of look into impact assessment of these social protection programs rather than saying, rather than using a blanket approach in terms of, yes, because it provides an income support to the family, it will automatically also reduce child labor or influence, children, outcomes for children in a way. I think that is something that we need to look into. I'll stop here. Maybe you have questions.
Thank you. Rati, I'm sure you agree with the last point of Rabia on school feeding programs. But what role does World Food Programme see for community-based early warning systems in improving emergency responses for vulnerable populations? Can you elaborate briefly on that?
Yeah, thank you. We talked a lot yesterday about making sure we have people at the center, and I think when it comes to disasters, we need to make sure that communities are at the center. In the end, the communities know what to do, so they have to be part of the solution. And we can't just dictate what's best for them. And that's also part of the whole dialogue on dignity. So again, at the end, the communities have the local knowledge. If you bring them in, I think in terms of the actual action, it'll enhance the accuracy and the relevance of the action. Also, when you bring in the community, there's more timely dissemination of information, which then also reduces the risk. Most importantly, I think it's important to bring the communities in so that they also feel empowered because they are part of the solution. There have been so many times where we as WFP have failed communities by designing assets that we believe that they would benefit from, which then once that, I shouldn't be saying this with donors in the room, but once the donor funds, taper off, that asset is actually not used. So it's a complete waste of resources. So we really need to bring in communities so we have them as part of the solution. There was quite a bit of talk this morning about the alerts and how they need to be customized ahead of an emergency. And also taking into account people with disabilities. So it's not just about the women and the children, but also people with disabilities. And, during the floods, it also struck me with Rescue 1122, how do we expand the rescue teams so that there are more women as well, because of the cultural issues, right? So if you have to evacuate, how do you give some level of comfort and dignity to the women and also to the people with disabilities? I talked before about collaboration, so that's really important with, particularly at the ground level with the DDMAs, to ensure a coordinated response. There's this whole complaints feedback mechanism, which I think is an interesting one because we do need to hear the voices of the people. And it's not necessarily by calling a hotline, but somehow figuring out a way, how can we hear what they're saying so that we can adjust our response? And then finally, how do we allocate resources in the best and most effective way? So to do that, that mapping and identification of the target areas of the most vulnerable need to happen early. So that we can allocate resources as efficiently and effectively as possible. Thank you.
Thanks, Rajia. So my final question for Sin Long, and I know you're a multilateral bank, so can you elaborate on any innovative financial mechanisms that ADB has supported to build resilience, for example, in education, in health?
Thank you. We would like to say that firstly, we would analyze the need for, financing, no matter it is from budget side or from any, international financial resource or other, non-government resources. Firstly, there was a study showing that for Pakistan annually, the financing on the climate change would be needed as big as $30 billion to $60 billion per year until 2030. And in this kind of gap, need for climate change financing, 45% will be on climate change adaptation needs and resilience needs. And then, latest data shows that, for example, in 2021, the number of the attracted flow of the climate change was about $4 billion, and only 20% is on climate change adaptation and resilience. And from this $4 billion, the $3.4 billion were from the international sources. So we would give even when we were preparing for example, the ADB's result-based lending for social protection sector, we even asked the question to different, stakeholders, including governments and others. Is there possible, firstly, for each relevant line sectors, relevant to, education, health, care, nutrition, this, to link, its midterm action plan or strategy, to the need of addressing the very pressing need from the poor population, as a priority. And then, for example, if education department would like to open new schools or reconstruct a school, where it will identify the location and from where to start. Would this kind of plan be really linked to, adaptation and for the relieving poverty, first as a priority. So this has not yet been answered, through our dialogues. So we would like to explore more. So it's we need joint efforts, from government budget, from the other, contributors. So this is from government budget side. Another aspect we would like to see is that what would be the potential of the different players in contributing to adaptive social protection and all this. We see, private and non-government, players as well. And their potential, their competences would be more seen in innovating, some schemes implementation. For example, right now, BISP is aimed at resuming its support for the skills development for the youth from the targeted poor families. But how to implement this with, to achieve the objective of employability, right? And how to make sure this process will really be less quality skills development and well monitored. So this really needs, firstly, to understand the needs from the youth, especially the youth from the poor families. Would they really be interested in taking skills development? And what would incentivize, their intake of skills development? And who would be quality service providers, to train them and linking them to job market and all this. So we need this, we call it this ecosystem. We need that. So that is another way. It's we might also be able to see how resources, no matter technically or financially, can be mobilized from the ecosystem as well. This is second. Third aspect is come to really like your question specifically is that what could be the modalities of financing. So we may say that we have been trying on implementing, firstly, for example, for the SIND, Secondary Education Improvement Project, the emergency assistance lending after the 2022 flood, where up to 1,600 schools will be reconstructed, and among them, of course, like this government will construct, with the ADB's lending, but the private sector, it's called like education management organizations, like they are private sector operators. They will be engaged through the PPP modality to operate, those schools. So this is one way, like to mobilize the different resources. Another is this result-based lending. So results are linked to achieving priorly defined output targets and outcome targets. So these are, for example, the number of the enrolled children in conditional cash transfer, the number of pregnant and lactating women, enrolled and complied with compliance requirements, and et cetera, et cetera. So we also encourage, in the same, we call disbursement linked indicator, we encourage the executing agency to set up this contingency plan, with their readiness to allocate budget for poor women and children affected by any possible upcoming disasters. So we have a requirement, how to update the social registry with the risk analytics really incorporated in the questionnaires, for measuring poverty of the people. So this kind of, measurement would need to be enriched. And so we see that other financing modalities and innovation could be, for example, in ADB we call it green and blue bonds. So green bonds are for climate change adaptation and mitigation, and blue bond is for ocean marine economy and the vulnerability by island countries and all this. So, for example, in Pakistan in 2024, there are several projects eligible for this green bond, and one of them I think relevant to us is the KP Food Security Support Project, in which there are $43 million attached to this green bond. So one component under this project is to support the climate vulnerable agriculture workers and their communities food security and all this. So I see there are more other initiatives like impact investment bond in education, in skills development. So these are all interesting areas to explore. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sin Long. So I look at the time, we are already behind schedule again. So I think I have to do a hard stop here, but I invite all our colleagues here, if you want to learn more about what the ADB, what the ILO, what the World Food Programme is doing here in Pakistan, or what are possible approaches, please talk to them maybe over lunch or during the coffee break, okay? So I need to finish here. Please give a hand to Sin Long, Ms. Rati, Ms. Rabia. And I will call now on all of you to proceed for a well-deserved coffee break. We're going to assemble here in half an hour from now or 25 minutes from now. Then we have session 9, the final thematic session. I will then hand over to our moderator. We have some interesting presentations and a panel. So see you in 25 minutes from now. Enjoy yourself.